Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the How to Film Weddings podcast. Today is a doozy. Nick and I were able to sit down with our good friend David Reynosa from Forestry Films and the Act of podcast. And guys, went a different direction with this podcast. It was a lot of fun. We talked about being financially stable as a wedding filmmaker and basically walked through having financial freedom as a wedding filmmaker. A lot of us don't think about our money. We don't think about how to save money, how to make sure that we have enough of it. And a lot of us live in a fear of not having enough or having too much. So we dive in and talk about that. We talk about his profitable filmmaker course. But before we jump into this week's episode, I had to shout out my good friends over at MusicBed. If you do not use MusicBed, I would highly encourage you to head over to howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed. We have a promo code to get you a free month off a yearly wedding subscription. MusicBed honestly is just the best place to find music for your wedding films. I just put out a film from Mexico that I just filmed and was able to find a track that really fit the theme, the Mexican theme that I wanted to have to really articulate where we were and the feel and mood. So many different songs that we poured into there, all from MusicBed. Exclusively been using MusicBed for, I want to say, a decade now. I mean, for as long as they've been out, I've been using MusicBed. So in love with what they do. If you haven't checked them out, head to howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed. And without further ado, here is Nick and me interviewing David Reynosa with Forestry Films. No, I think you look good. I mean, I honestly feel like being so handsome, it's kind of nice to have somebody not on such a nice camera, it kind of evens us a little bit.
Well, I really appreciate the encouragement. That's why I come on these podcasts, because I know John will always make a comment about my hair. If I'm feeling low, I just hey man, we need to do a podcast so you can just well up my soul with joy. So thank you for that.
It is not smoke either. I don't flirt with too many of our male guests.
Too many of them.
Oh, now I'm feeling uncomfortable. I wasn't
All right,
ready.
Then
for
let's
this.
start.
Oh no,
we're in a perfect spot.
Perfect spot.
I'll be all red when I'm starting. Okay, here we go.
Oh, geez. All right. I think that maybe that's going to be in the podcast. I think we just get going. Nick,
All right. Yeah, we're kind of off the rails already. I'm a little nervous about this next 60 minutes.
I like it. No. So for the people that are listening, welcome. And we have our good buddy, David Reynosa from Forestry Film, the Act of podcast, educator, mindset dude that just, I don't know, Nick, I love being around David. I love getting the opportunity to hang out with him. It's been, I think, a couple of years, David, since you've been on the podcast. So welcome back. Say hello. Let us know kind of a little bit. What's life look like for you now? What are you doing? It's been a minute.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys so much for having me on the podcast. It has been a hot second since Venture. I think a year and a half almost. Kind of crazy. Yeah.
Or almost a year. October,
almost
right?
A year.
Yeah. Since we've seen you. Yeah.
It's crazy. Well, my life has been, all over the place. For those people that don't know a whole lot of my story, I've been doing wedding films, I think for 14 years now. I started in high school, freshman year or so of high school, and then been doing it ever since. And probably for the big bulk of that time, 10 or so years, it was all weddings. And I was doing the whole, wedding every weekend. I think at the peak in 2019 around, I was traveling 6 months out of the year, constantly driving, constantly flying, and the business was booming, but I was just absolutely exhausted. I felt like I was doing the work I really wanted to be doing, but personal life, family life was just not great. And so at around 2019, I made the transition to education, and I started pouring into, I was getting all these DMs from people saying, hey, I would love you to mentor me. I would love you to do this or that. Nick was one of my first kind of one-on-one mentorships, which was amazing. I always think back to that time. It was awesome. And around 2019, probably even before that, 2018, I was like, I could do these one-on-one mentorships with people, or I could record myself and then distribute that. And nobody in the wedding market was doing any type of education. I mean, online education in general was kind of non-existent. And so I had no idea what I was doing. Like my first education website, I think I had like 3 or 4 hours of content on how to shoot a wedding. And I'm thinking, maybe I could sell this for a couple $100s. I think I charged $400 for the thing. And I felt like that was insanity. No one's going to buy it. There's no way. And then I think I ended up selling like $20,000 or $30,000 in that first sale, which was just mind blowing to me that I made that much compared to 6 months of shooting weddings. And so that kind of started the whole journey. And that's the journey I've been on the last 3 or 4 years, is leaning heavily into education, shooting only a few weddings a year to continue to try out new things. I mean, I love filmmaking. I love the artistry of it. But I think what I found I love even more is sitting across with someone and having them tell me, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. And kind of like that joy that teachers get where they see that aha moment, except it's 10 times more, because if I do a one-on-one mentorship with someone, or if I do a group coaching, or they take a course and I get an email saying, oh my goodness, after taking your course, my wife was able to quit her job. I was able to transition to full-time. Like, this changed my life, is like a high like no other. So that's kind of what I'm currently focusing on. But if I'm being completely honest, this last year has been hard, as it's been hard for everyone in the wedding industry. Like, weddings have been down, or they've been kind of random and all over the place. And 2021 and 2022 were amazing in the business. And I was like, oh my goodness, things will just keep going up and up and up. And then 2023 hit, and I'm like, shoot, this is really hard, even with me being in education. So 2023 has been kind of a year of a lot of self-reflection on just, okay, really, what do I want to be doing? Am I still passionate about education? Do I like seeing this transformation? And then also really coming to terms with a lot of financial things, because when years are going so great, you think, oh, I have a good relationship with money. But then when 2023 hits or COVID hits, and all of a sudden your bank account gets cut in half, or you start making 70% less, all of a sudden you start panicking and you realize, oh my goodness, I have idolized money, because when it's gone, I feel like I have nothing. I feel like I'm spinning my wheels. I'm anxious. I'm stressed out. And so really a lot of this year has been character building when money has been less, figuring out, how do I actually manage my life so I'm not a slave to money, whether it's going really great or really bad. So that's been a lot of thought process that I've kind of been going through.
Nick raised his hand if you weren't watching on YouTube. Nick did a mentor session with David. I purchased your Craft 5K course forever ago. I think it was, I think it was right when it came out, but we are big fans of everything that you do. And just when you're around David, you can see his passion for education, and he's just such a good teacher and someone we look up to as like, oh man, he's really doing it. And so wanted to have you back on, and you opened up the can of worms, and Nick and I have been talking about this a lot lately, just about the idea of like your financial side of your business, your financial freedom as a filmmaker, your what that looks like. You know, some years are good, some aren't, and I think we just, as wedding filmmakers in general, we don't think about that kind of stuff very often, and it's just like, yeah, it'll all work out. We're fine. We'll buy that piece of gear instead of putting any money back. And so just kind of wanted to have a conversation and open up kind of what Nick and I have been doing when it comes to how we're saving or what we're investing in, and all that kind of stuff. But just wanted to kind of start it out with, like, I know that's a really big subject for you, investing, people having debt, no plan for retirement. And I know you've been teaching a lot and talking a lot about these kinds of things. So for those out there that are like, man, I don't have a plan, I'm kind of terrible with money, I don't, it'll all work out. Like, what would you say just to kick off the conversation about mindset or anything really regarding that topic?
Yeah. Money is always like just such a hard thing to talk about. It's kind of a taboo subject, even around other friends that I know who are business owners. Nobody talks about it. And I'm kind of like, I kind of geek out around it. So I'm like, hey, what are you doing? I'd love to know so that I can also know. But I think because so few people talk about it, there's so much shame when it comes to money, because someone will look at their bank account and say, oh my goodness, I have so much debt, or I've saved no money, and feel like a complete failure. And I think one helpful thing to talk about is you shouldn't feel that way, because if we really think about it, like investing and all this knowledge that we've had around it, or getting out of debt, or saving and things like that, it's very much a new phenomenon. Like the idea to be able to become a millionaire from investing or from stocks has really only been around like the last 70 or 80 years. And so for a lot of people, their parents would have been the ones who would have taught them about these things, but their parents didn't have access to any of the things that we have access to today. And I think what's even more important to talk about is, so often if you read a finance book or you watch a passive, investment YouTube video, they're like, hey, you could be a millionaire in the next 30 years, and you get excited. But then also what's immediately strapped onto that is stress. Well, I got to start hustling. I got to start grinding. Where am I going to get that extra money? And I think what we do in that case is we actually trade one mode of freedom for another, to where we think, oh, true financial freedom is getting $1 million or being debt free, or, having extra money. Like all those things are good, but you're not actually truly financially free until you can look at money and say, regardless of what I have in my bank account, regardless of how much debt I have, regardless of how much I have saved for investment, I am okay, because my worth is not tied to my money. And I think there's just such this crazy rhetoric going around right now, even this whole idea of net worth, that your net worth as a human being is your debt subtracted from your assets. That is your net worth. It makes in our mind that, oh, all my worth is my bank account. Where really we should think about it is, whatever money I have is the assets I have under my management to steward, to love others well. And so I think that is really a good way to think about mindset when it comes to money. Like for me, I grew up in probably a middle-class household, but we always struggled with money. My parents were always unwise with kind of credit cards, and they even told me, hey, don't do what we did. Because I grew up with, hey, there's very little money at the end of every month. We really got to save. And I felt that pressure as a kid. And I remember when I got out of the house, I'm like, I'm not going to ever be in debt like my parents were. And I swung kind of the other way and really optimized my finances, got out of debt, did all the right things. But I realized my mindset around money was the exact same as what got my parents into debt. Whereas for them, it was like they were a slave kind of to money because they had all this debt. So they were constantly thinking about money, constantly thinking about how to get out of debt. Whereas I was a slave to money in a similar way, constantly thinking how to make more of it, how to optimize more of it. And it kind of controlled all of my decisions. Whereas what I really dug into this year and in 2020, where my income literally cut by 50% or like 30%, 40%, massive amounts. And I got so anxious and freaked out. I was like, that's the life of a business owner. There'll always be highs and always lows. And if I have my happiness tied to how much I'm making, there's never going to be peace in my life when it comes to finances. And so for me personally, what I really lean into as a Christian, I believe that everything I have is from God. He has given me every penny in my bank account to steward. And if there's less in there, that's because he allowed that. If there's more in there, that's because he allowed it. And as a Christian, and other Christians could relate to this, that if we believe that God is actually our Father and he only gives us good gifts, that he is in control of absolutely everything, then that's the trust that I put all my trust into, is that he is in control of everything, regardless of what my bank account is doing. And that has helped me so much to be like, hey, I made 50% less this year. Well, I know that God is taking care of me. And if that is there, then I know he's allowing it for a certain reason, because he wants me to grow in this area or that area, and he's never going to leave me. And money will always come and go, but he never will. And so that has really helped me change my mindset. And I think for people who are listening who are not Christians or don't have a faith, you could still take that principle and saying, is my identity tied to my money? How can I make sure that my happiness is not tied to how much I have in my bank account? That is really what we got to kind of open the conversation with. Because if it is, you're always going to be in those highs and lows.
Yeah, man, that's all really, really good stuff. What you said about your parents, don't do what I did. Don't do what we did. That's one thing that I learned from my dad. As we were talking about money and stuff, and he's like, Nick, do as I say, not as I do. I'm like, well, that's okay. I'm glad that you have realized that the things that you have done and the mistake, but in doing those things, you want me to do what you didn't do, but you didn't show me or tell me how to do the things that you want me to do. It was a very, very kind of confusing, thing in there. And, as I've gotten older, but one thing that he always did talk to me about was being a generous person. My parents were bad with money, but I saw every week at church on Sunday, like they were putting in, $100 in the collection plate, 150, like they were giving money. So they were being generous where they should have been, but they also weren't, living, maybe, treating their other money, how they should. Right. I think a big issue that I have as a person is, I am an all or nothing kind of person. I don't know if you guys can relate to this, where it's like,
I can't relate at all.
If I'm going on a
just
diet,
a nothing person.
right. If I'm going on a diet where I have to, eat a certain way, it's like, okay, if I have to be perfect, and every day I'm perfect. And if I have the wrong thing for breakfast, then I'm like, okay, screw the diet today. I had, a Pop-Tart for breakfast, so I might as well just eat burgers and pizzas and whatever the rest of the day because my breakfast was screwed up, And whenever it would come to money stuff, I would hear things about, oh, you need to be saving, you need to do this. And I was like, well, literally where I am when I'm 27 and my student loans have kicked in and I'm just not making a ton of money, the only thing I can do is $50. So, but it's just $50. Like that's not worth it. So I wouldn't do anything because the amount that I could do was really low. And I think as I've gotten older, one of the encouragements that I have from money is you can hear from people that have a lot saying, well, if I was starting over, I would take $10,000 and invest it in this. And like,
in Google,
I don't even have $50, let alone 10 grand. Like how can I go start doing some of this stuff? And I think a lesson that I'm learning as I get older is you don't have to be an all or nothing kind of person when it comes to your finances, when it comes to your health, when it comes to learning and education. You don't have to be, you can be, I'm going to take a little step. I'm going to do one little thing. And so figure out an amount for, as we're talking about saving, or figure out something that will make you feel comfortable that you can do these things and start these steps. Because whenever you start, like that's the hardest thing, is just getting going. And then after you kind of have those habits, it's easier to build on them and figure those things out. So as you were talking, that was a thought that I had. I don't know if either of you guys have anything you want to add to that.
Yeah,
or take
absolutely.
away from it.
I think it scares a lot of people that they're like, oh my goodness, I'm listening to this and I'm 45 or I'm 50 and what do I do? And so, and even what you said too about it's very hard when we haven't had correct money habits modeled by anyone in our life and no one talks about it. And I love how you mentioned giving, because that's one thing I've always been extremely passionate about, is always giving, even if I have a lot of debt, even if I barely scraping by in a single year. Because what I've noticed, so one thing that I do that's a little different in my business, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the Profit First system. I know you've had Mike on. I know you guys probably follow something similar in how to film weddings and in your personal life. That has changed the game. So I'm sure listeners kind of know what that's about. If you don't, definitely check out that book. But essentially what it is in your business, you have, buckets for every category of where dollars go. So kind of like an envelope system for your business, but it's digital. And so you have a bucket for taxes, you have a bucket for operating expenses, for owner's pay, for profit, etc. And what I started doing, this is like 4 or 5 years ago, is I made I think there's 4 buckets or 5 buckets. I made a 5th bucket, and that's for giving. And so 10% of every dollar that comes in to my business, I allocate towards giving. And that was a big act of faith for me. That was kind of just 2 modes of saying, okay, I see how this world works. There's just a universal truth in the fabric of the cosmos that when our world is based on giving. There are we live in a world of so much abundance. There's not a scarcity of anything. You can go outside and literally plant a little seed and grow an apple tree and have like fruit that you can eat that can sustain you. I mean, it's crazy. There's abundance everywhere. And as I look at the Bible and what God tells us to do, it's to give what he did for us. He gave first. He gave his life first for us before we did anything. And if I'm to model what he did for me, I need to give first as well and trust that he has my back. It's kind of this whole idea of if you were standing on a diving board and a super, super high one, like a high dive board, and there's a bunch of people at the bottom on the ground saying, hey, I want you to close your eyes and jump. We will catch you. Everything in your body, everything in your mind is saying, okay, you want me to circumvent everything my body has been trying to do the last 30 years to keep me standing upright, to not get me hurt. You want me to shut that off and jump with my eyes closed and trust that you're going to catch me. I'm not going to die and shatter all my bones in my body. And they're like, yes. And you do that and they catch you. You're like, oh my goodness. That's amazing. And that's what I found is the same thing with giving and trusting God to provide, even when there's not money there. And it's been one of the most life-changing financial things I've ever done in my life, is to take that 10%, which for certain years adds up to a lot. I'm talking 10% of like gross income, not 10% of personal. And that's when it comes to the end of the year and I have that money sitting in that bucket, trust me, there's that battle of, wow, I could use that for a Tesla, or I could use that for, like to pay for real things that I need. And every year I'm saying, you know what is more important in terms of my relationship with money is my heart with my relationship with money. And the only way that's going to be worked on is if I do things that are scary, that push me outside of my comfort zone. And so when I give that money every year, God has always provided for me. And I would say, even if you can't give a lot, even if you're saying, oh my goodness, I have no idea where to start with this financial journey. I have debt. I'm older. I don't know. I can only put besides $50 into investment accounts and I have no savings. If I were to say one thing to start with, and we hardly ever talk about this, you don't see this in any videos really on YouTube, is before starting with saving for yourself, start with allocating even 1%. Start with 1% to give to somebody else, whether that be your church, whether that be someone in need. What that will do in your heart is actually more important than $1 million in a bank account, more important than paying off debt, more important than having savings. It will change your heart to view others' needs as more important than yourself, and it will give you more joy than any of those things. And as that starts to work on your heart, and as you start to become a generous person, you'll start to see the world in an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And that is a heart change that will change everything else. So I would tell everyone to start with giving first. And then, of course, there's practical things that you can do on the other side. But giving, I would say, would be the number one thing to tackle.
Yeah, that's all very, very good. And I, as a believer as well, since I was a little kid, remember mowing yards or doing things and earning money, and my dad saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you about tithing and giving." And I feel like that was one thing that my dad did really well, was just like, "Hey, money is not like your source. God is your source, and like He's looking at your heart." And what would happen if God asked you to give 10% of that or whatever? And I just made that $20. I wanted to go buy Legos. Like, what are you talking about? Or whatever it was. But like, it did change my heart towards being a giving person. And if you listen or watch through How to Film Weddings and what we do, we are givers. Like, we try to do all the giving that we can with our time and our effort. And, this business has been blessed because of that. And our mindset is not scarcity. It's like, if you guys don't know, David offers courses that are technically direct competitors to our courses or a podcast or what. And it's like, we're not in a scarcity mindset. We're in an abundance mindset. And it's like, can God not take care of us and David? And can we not be generous to David and David, and that sort of mindset just kind of flows through everything that we've done as business owners, and not even just financially, of course, but, generosity to people, to our couples, to like the giving side of things. That whole nature is shifted. And I love what you said about like your net worth, and I saw a video, like your net worth should not be your self-worth. And, these numbers of, my net worth is I'm a net worth millionaire. Great. That doesn't make you better than the next person or whatever. And it's like, I was driving this morning and I was in traffic and I was just thinking, it's weird that in 100 years, none of these people are going to be here. Like maybe a couple, but none of them really. I mean, they're all driving age. They would be 116 at least, all these people, and just how quickly, our lives come and go and all that stuff. And a lot of us spend so much time with our central focus being, I have to make money or I have to save money. And like you're saying, both sides of that equation are the same. You're enslaved to the money. And like what Nick was saying, just starting somewhere. I'm similar in an all or nothing, where it's just like, I'm not going to work out unless I hire a personal trainer and can work out 6 days a week and buy all the supplements. So I might as well just go to CC's pizza buffet and get all I can eat. That's great. Or, it's like, I could start like this at the gym this last week. I've been like, I really need to start doing more core workouts. I'll do that next week. I'll do that next week. I'll do that next week. And I was just like, I'm just going to do a minute of planks today. And then the next day I was like, I'm going to do a minute of planks and like 50 bicycles. Great. And then it was like, I'm going to do some whatever. And it as I get going, it's like, oh yeah, abs. I got to do the core workouts. I feel a little bit stronger, and I'm feeling like it felt like this big mountain to do that side of the workouts. And now it's just like become part of what I do. And I think a lot of us, like, especially creatives, it's just like money. I don't want to think about money and how to handle money. And money is this taboo subject. So I'm not going to save any of it. I'm not going to. And so like having that healthy relationship with money, respecting it, we all need it. But at the same time, it's like, how can we be givers? And then also how can we be putting some of it back for the future? So any thoughts? I don't know how to transition that, but I'm sure David's got.
I think like I love all of that. And I think that would be a good transition to just talk about some practical things filmmakers specifically can do, because they're thinking, I got kind of the mindset, maybe this has been something that's been nagging on them for a while. They know they have to do something, but like Nick said, like you said, I mean, I think we're all the same. I'm like, hey, if I'm going to do anything, I will procrastinate until I can do it perfectly, until I can drop tens of thousands of dollars to like make it amazing. And so I'm going to talk from some of my failures and then some of my wins, and all of it comes down to consistency. So I think for filmmakers, what I've noticed when I've talked to friends that have really won with money, it's actually not complicated. The more complicated your money plan is, more than likely you're doing it wrong and it's leading to failure. More than likely, yes, there's the top half of the 1% that can optimize perfectly, but that's really not where most filmmakers should be. Your plan should be simple. And I've kind of laid it out like this, and this is probably going to be things that people have heard before. This is very typical money advice. And what's really helpful that I found is whenever you really want to understand a subject and apply it to your life, pick a subject and read 5 or 6 books on that subject. And what you're going to start to recognize is patterns between all those different books. And then you're going to start to see, actually the truth that's linking all these different authors together are these 6 or 7 things. And that's going to give you a really fundamental understanding of any subject. And it's a really good way to become an expert at a subject quickly. So it's a little thing for free, but it's related to money. And what I've noticed in reading books and also in my own life and in mentoring other people, it really comes down to a couple tenets. And these are not in order, these are just things that I do that you can start today. So I think one of the very first ones is never 100% your income. And what I mean by that is so many filmmakers spend 150% of their income, or they spend 100%. That's where most people are. Not just filmmakers. This is the average American, average population. I know there's listeners that aren't American, but average humans, it's innate in us that when we get money, we get a raise, we're going to spend it on a vacation, and then at the end of the year, we're going to say, where did that money go? And one of the best things that I have done in my personal life, in my business, is to always spend at least 70 to 80% of the income I bring in, no matter what the year is doing. Now, certain years, you can't do this every year. Some years are hard and you need to spend 100%, or you need to spend 105 just to survive. But that should be the exception, not the rule. And if you make it the rule of, okay, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I know this is how I'm going to win with money, if I make 100,000 a year, I'm going to spend 80,000 and then save 20,000. And always putting that $20,000 aside into something like savings, paying off debt, investment, that over time is going to help you massively win with money. And that's just a foundational habit that in order to win with money at all, in order to get into any of the investing things, debt things, paying off stuff, you have to have that down. And so that could be something you could start today with $0. With $0, you could just say, I'm going to spend 95%, at least it's less than 100. And every year you want to get it lower and lower and lower. And some of my best years, if I'm making a lot more than I typically need in a year, I try to save 50% of my income certain years. That is a goal that seems probably just absolutely crazy to most people. But if you can do that, if that could be where you can get, you could absolutely crush it with money in 10 or so years. But if you could do 80%, saving 20, that's amazing to be at. And I think piggybacking right after that, the second one is debt. Like getting out of debt is so huge. This is not just me talking from my own experience. This is me talking to other people. A lot of people treat debt like a little pet they have in the corner. It would almost be like I think of debt as, imagine you had, and this is just gross, and as this word picture kind of popped in my mind, but this is kind of I think about debt. You have like a black widow in the corner of your house, and you're like, oh, that's a cute little black widow. I'm just going to kind of leave it there. And you walk into the house the next day, it's still in the corner, but you've noticed it's like made a little egg sack, and you're just like, oh, I'm even getting grossed out talking about this, but it's like there. And then you're like, oh, it's fine. And then the spiders start coming out, and then there's more egg sacs and more egg sacs. And before you know it, the whole corner is just black widows everywhere. And you're just like, that's fine. And then all of a sudden the house is just full of spiders. Like whatever you're feeling right now, hearing that, I'm feeling just the grossness of that. Like that is what debt does in your bank account. It just grows and grows and grows until it becomes this master, crazy, disgusting force of nature. And it's kind of like you're in a boat and you're trying to paddle to the other side, but then people just keep poking holes in the boat all the way until you get to the other side and you're not going to hit it. And I think the hard thing with debt is, for a lot of people, a lot of debt is wrapped up in school debt, car debt, and home debt. And it just feels like, how the heck, David, do you want me to pay off $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 of debt? That's so much. And I think what I like to tell people is I always direct them to the idea of the debt snowball, which is Dave Ramsey kind of, brought this into light. And it's how I paid off a lot of my debt. It's how so many people have paid off a lot of their debt, is you write down, like I would encourage you to do this. It's life-changing. You'd write down all your debts on an Apple Note or on a piece of paper, from the biggest debt that you hold in terms of the amount. So say the biggest debt you have is $100,000 for school loans. And then you have $10,000 of car debt. And then you have $5,000 of, miscellaneous credit card debt. You'd list them all out. And then literally what you'd start doing, like Nick was saying, even if you only have $50, the first thing you would do with that 20% that you're saving every year, not going to 100% of your income every year, you would just start paying off the smallest debt. And what you're going to find out is within a couple, maybe even a few months, you're going to have that smallest debt paid off. And the joy and the encouragement and the happiness you're going to feel by having that $5,000 just miscellaneous credit card debt paid off will be massive. And it's going to give you the encouragement to then tackle the car debt, which is at $10,000. Then you're going to have that paid off in less than a year. And then you're going to be able to look to your spouse or even to yourself and say, I paid off 2 massive debts in a year. And then you can start tackling your biggest debt. Now, I know there's probably a lot of financial nerds listening to this, and they're saying, well, that might not be the smartest way to do it, because if you look at the interest rate on your biggest debt, it would be smarter to pay that one off first and then leave your smaller debts till after. And yes, like the smartest financially, if you're going to have an Excel spreadsheet, yeah, you would save probably more money paying off the giant $100,000 school debt loan first versus paying off the miscellaneous credit card debt first. But most people, I'd say 98% of people, they're going to say, okay, well, I want to do the smartest thing. And they're going to start with their $100,000 school debt first. And they're going to get exhausted because there's not going to be any momentum. They're going to feel like, wow, I'm not even making a dent. And they're just going to give up. And so that's why you want to start with the smallest first. And let me tell you, when you get out of debt, it is a freedom, financial freedom feeling almost like no other. And then you can take all that money that you were directing towards debt payments and then start investing with it. And that's really where the magic happens. So I'd say those are like the first 2 major practical things that have changed my life when it comes to thinking about money.
But yeah. David, we live in a crockpot, or we live in a microwave society. We need stuff now. Apple's coming out with a new phone. Sorry. All right, Nick. Sorry, Nick.
I forgot which podcast we were on. I didn't know we were on Martha Stewart. Thank you, John.
Right. No. Are you looking for a better way to deliver your wedding films? Look no further. Our friends over at VidFlow provide the most flexible video delivery solution on the market. VidFlow is pay-per-use with no large upfront costs or commitment, and you can cancel at any time. VidFlow offers a premium viewing experience for all of your couples, accessible on mobile, tablet, desktop, as well as their very own suite of TV apps. Each project comes with 10 years of hosting and an experience for your couples that will blow them away. Head over to howtofilmweddings.com/vidflow, where you can save 20% off a yearly business membership by using promo code HTFW20. Stop delivering your films the old-fashioned way. Give your couples something to rave about by using VidFlow. Yeah, as you were talking about that, it's as simple as don't spend more than you make. Like that. That's as simple as it is, and it's even more. You're saying more than that, but I think one of the tough things that so many people have going for them or whatever is credit and debt is just so easy and so acceptable, and it's not. We don't live in a society where if someone has debt, they live in this corner and they feel really bad. You look, does anyone else have debt? And it's like 95% of the room. And we're not just talking about house, right? We're talking about massive student loan, house, cars, credit card debt, because they have a basement full of big TVs and video games and stuff that, they can't afford, like that's just the society we live in this, world of materialism and just all of these things. And one thing that, as John and I, have talked a lot about money and shared a lot about money is, if you don't make a plan for your money, and I'm sure that this is something Dave Ramsey has said, lots of other people, if you don't make a plan for how you're going to spend your money will spend you. And so with everything that we have, it should be, assign where this penny is going to go, assign where these things are going to go. And one thing that I noticed, if throughout my entire life, whether I was working as a just starting out of college youth minister, had a church job, to going into full-time with video, to all that kind of stuff. Whenever I sit down and I make a budget and I assign where my money is going, I always find that I make more money than I thought I did. Because I get so wrapped up in whenever I don't know where my money is going, well, I'm going out to eat 6 times a week, or I'm just going to the store and I'm buying random, just throwing stuff out there. But it's you think, oh, I don't have any money. But the reason that you think that you don't have any money is because of the habits that you have made around money. And so if you sit down and you tell your money where to go, you might actually see, oh, you know what? I thought I could only give or save $50 a month. Actually, it turns out I have $150 that I can do that. Like now that I've priced it out and I've looked at it, one of the things that we have, and I'm not trying to do a plug to sell something on our website here or anything like that, but we have this budget sheet, and one of the things that it does in there, it's kind of gives you like a 3-month constant look ahead. If you're filling it out, we have a couple of months extra so you can kind of see where it is. And John made this and gave it to me, and I'm filling it out and I'm looking in there, and we had, I don't know, it was like a $15,000 in student loan debt. This was a couple of years ago. And so we were making, we had paid off a lot, but we were, making payments and stuff. And I was like, man, I really want to go. I really want to get rid of this stuff. It's a burden. Like it was just this, there's something always hanging over your head whenever you have something big like that. And as I'm filling this thing out, and it was in, 21 into 2021, but 2022 people had started booking, like all of this money was coming in. And then How to Film Weddings was helping, with that as well. But I looked at what I was bringing in, and I looked 3 months ahead, and then I saw at the end of the year, if stuff kept tracking how it was, that I had a surplus of like $40,000 or something like that. If stuff just continued, like it was like money was coming, like, so I could look and see, you know what, I can write a $15,000 check and pay off my student loans. One of the reasons I was able to do that was because I had a budget, but I also was looking forward and I had a plan for the future and I could see where it was going. That like what you said. And I think one of the big things with the debt snowball, why paying your smallest is huge, because if you're paying $100 a month for a year off this credit card debt, and then you get that done, you're like, wow, I can look back down the mountain, if you want to think of it that way, and see how far I've come. And like, there's something psychologically to, oh, I've done this. So now I can take that 100 for that, and I can put it toward this $200 payment that I was making. Now we're making $300. So you're getting ahead, and like looking down that mountain is just so big. So, I don't know where to transition to, John, here again, but I got pumped up and I wanted to share some things.
Well, I'm happy you do, and I want to throw it back over to David very soon. What it comes down to it's just discipline over time equals success. It's like being diligent. All these things, these words that, like I try to live my life by or whatever. And a lot of people just aren't paying any attention to this subject. Like, it's a scary subject. I don't like talking about it. It's going to be fine. Don't bug me about it. I'll just go work and make more. I want to spend what I want to spend. Inflation is bad. It costs a lot to live where I live, whatever the excuses are, but math is still math and diligence is still diligence. And like, I remember the very beginning of How to Film Weddings, we were getting going, and I had other businesses that I had taken out loans for. I took a $250,000 loan out in 2012 to open up like a wedding shop and pay, like it's paid off. Like all this stuff that just was this, I'm never taking out debt again. Like I went in a ton of debt for student loans, and it was like, I'm not doing debt. And at the beginning we were looking at doing some stuff for How to Film Weddings, and Nick was like, well, we could always like borrow some money and I was like, absolutely not borrowing money. It's not going to happen. I will quit, but I will die before I borrow another penny. Not that I don't think it's technically like it's not like a sin or something to borrow, but it was just like the principles that we set up for How to Film Weddings was like, we're going to save more than we spend or than we make. And we're going to live on less than that. And we're going to store money up. So if months are bad, that's fine. If months are good. And that has allowed us to make decisions based on the character that we have instead of, oh shoot, we can't pay this month, or we can't. Instead, when it's like, hey, Nick, are you cool if we send that person a $50 gift card to dinner because they helped us out? Or are you okay? And we've been just hundreds of times throughout the 5 years of doing this, just, hey, how can we be extra generous to somebody? How can we give our course to somebody? How can we be givers? And like that all ties in. If we don't have enough and no abundance, there's no overflow, then we can't be generous to other people. And just having that subject out there of like, hey, what are you doing with your money? Are you being smart with it? And then starting to like it's kind of hard to invest into your future if you're overflowing with debt, and every month your debt's getting bigger and crushing you. And so a lot of people try to do all the things all at once. And that's why we also love principles like what Dave Ramsey teaches, and like focusing hard on that one debt and paying that one debt off, and focusing hard on not adding any more debt to the hole that you're in. It's hard to get out of a hole when you keep digging into the hole. So all those principles. And it's like, what does it have to do with wedding filmmaking? It has everything to do with it, because are you having to take on a new wedding film just because you need $2,000 this month? Are you having to say yes to clients you don't want to say yes to because you have a credit card payment due, or whatever it is? Those kinds of decisions stop having to be made for you when you're the one that's controlling where your money goes.
Absolutely. And I think it kind of comes back to the whole idea of, why do we want to have money work for us instead of having us be a slave to money? It's like you said, John, it's to be able to shoot the kind of weddings that we want to shoot and be able to live the life that we kind of want to live. And I love to, Nick, what you said about, it was crazy when you started to measure all the analytics that, oh my goodness, I have so much extra money that I didn't know that I had. And I'd say just as frequent in terms of when I'm talking to other filmmakers, the idea of, oh, I have so much debt. Coupled with that is I do no form of tracking my personal expenses, and very little when it comes to tracking my business expenses. So I love that resource that you just mentioned, Nick. That would be amazing for business tracking. I don't know if it's for personal tracking.
It works both
as well.
ways, yeah.
It works both ways. Because one thing that I have noticed in my business is when performance is measured, performance improves every single time.
It's very good.
The best way to start, like today, like right after this podcast, is just to start managing or measuring your personal finances, because more than likely you probably have between $100 and $500 of expenses that you can cut that you have no idea are there because you're not measuring them. And that can go to, paying off debt. That can go to a piece of gear that you've really been eyeing. That can go to something that you really care about. And one of my favorite apps for that is called Copilot Money. It's just in the US right now, but it has been life-changing, because I'm of the belief that you're only going to manage your money if it's fun and easy to do so. If it's complicated, most people won't do it. And Copilot Money is super easy. They have a Mac app, they have an iPhone app, and I've tried all of them. I've tried Mint, I've tried You Need a Budget, I've tried Every Dollar, I've tried all the apps. And this one is exciting, it's fun, it has everything there. And I think it's like $2.99 a month. It is worth it. And I recommend it to every single filmmaker. It really works well for self-employed people. All the other apps, they kind of pigeonhole you into how a typical employee would relate to money, and this app doesn't do that. And then what I want to do, because I know we don't have very much time here, I kind of want to transition into, okay, so these are the basics, and I'm sure a lot of people who are listening have heard a lot of these things before, and they're very important. Just because they're basics doesn't mean they're necessary. A lot of people disregard the basics because they think they're simple, but that's where the life change happens. Although once we master the basics, like why do we truly want to get out of debt? Yes, to have the financial freedom, to have that weight lifted off, to not have the burden of taking on every wedding. But just like debt works, so on debt, you have interest, 20%, 30%. So you might have taken out a $200 loan, but if you don't pay that sucker off, it could turn into $4,000 if you just keep amassing all the interest. But that can work for us in the positive. What if you were to take $200 and instead of you owing $5,000, you would make $5,000? And that's what I really want to inspire so many filmmakers with, is that when you're out of debt, you can start investing your money. Now, investing is such a scary thing for so many people. They've heard a lot of horror stories of, I don't want to invest my money. One, because I don't understand it, it's just too complicated. Or two, I'm scared that I'm going to lose all my money. And I've done a ton of digging and I follow this myself. And I think the best investment strategy is simple. And so to give you guys, I do this with everyone I sit down with because it is so inspiring. So there is if you're listening to this podcast, you can go to a site called the Compound Interest Calculator by I think it's a .gov site. I'll pull it up right now. It is, let's see, Compound Interest Calculator. It's at investor.gov. And essentially what it will do is allow you to put in, hey, if I invest this much every month at this interest rate, how much would I have in 30 years? How much would I have in 50 years, et cetera? And so this is an exercise I do that just absolutely blows people's minds. So say you are in an ideal place to start investing. Let's say you're 25 years old and you're planning to retire when you're 60. So how many, oh goodness, I'm doing math on a 35. Podcast. This will be 35. Thank you. Thank you for saving my bet. Okay. So you would have 35 years of investing power, essentially. And so say you put around $500. I'm actually just going to do this on the calculator so I don't misspeak. Say you're 25 and you have around $5,000 of cash just sitting aside. You're like, I don't really know what I want to do with this. I'm thinking about saving it, maybe investing it. I'm not sure. So let's say you start at $5,000 initially invested. Then every month after that, you contribute $500 towards that investment for the next 35 years. Okay. And the stock market, I'm going to oversimplify this, but for the sake of the podcast, it's really going to get this point across that if you were to spread out your money across the whole stock market, have a little bit of a percentage of your money invested into the top stocks, that are around, the stock market typically returns at 10% after, taking the average of the last 60, 70 years. So sometimes the stock market returns at 30%. Sometime in a given year, sometimes it returns at 5%, sometimes it's low, sometimes it's a negative 10%. But when you average it out over the last 70, 80 years, it's around 10% return. So if we take those numbers at initial investment of 5,000, monthly contribution of 500, which if you're in debt, that $500 would be going towards that. So that's why we want to get out of debt so we can have it go towards this, multiplied by 35 years at a 10% interest rate. Let's see, it's doing its calculations. I'm clicking calculate. Watch, it's going to freeze on me. Let's see. Okay. So if you did that for 35 years, you would have $1.7 million in 35 years. And essentially the way it would work is you would have contributed in terms of cash of your own. You would have, at 35 years, you would have contributed around $215,000. Which would have then grown to $1.7 million. So through the power of having interest work for your favor instead of against you like it does in debt, you would have made over $1 million by doing absolutely nothing other than having your money invested in the stock market. And that's just absolutely mind-blowing. And that's why we want to get out of debt.
And a lot of people are skeptics when it comes to investments like that, investing oh, well, show me where you can get 10%. The market only, it's what if you're half wrong? What if it was only it's what if 700, would you rather have 700 grand after that time? The point is it's never going to be anything if you don't start doing something. And the principles of how this world is set up is most people are not winning the lottery and sticking the money into their bank account and keeping it. Most people even that win the lottery end up going bankrupt because they don't know how to handle money. And for me as a person of faith, whenever Heather and I were just first getting married, it was we both committed, we're going to give no matter what. And there were months where it was we literally have to pick between our electric bill, our water bill, and our gas bill. When we first got married, I had student loan payments out the wazoo. But the very first thing we did was we would give 10% of what we brought in and say, God, you tell us to test you and you'll prove us in this. We trust you. Our heart is yours. It was kind of actually easy to do because it was we don't have money anyway, so we'll give you $60. Here we go. Whatever. And just somehow it always started working out. And I'm a big believer in God gives back to us, but his currency a lot of times is wisdom, right? And so it's all of a sudden this great idea would drop in my heart. Oh, you should do this. And oh, that'd be a great way. I could film football games and make extra money. Okay, cool. And like, I got to watch as like all these ideas would start coming in, and I was expectant. My heart was very expectant. Like, what is it that I can do for more money? God, where you at? I'm looking, I'm ready. My hands are open. Like, people aren't just writing me checks and putting them in the mailbox. Like, that's not doing. But I keep having these ideas, like I should film weddings. I could film whatever. And that's how I even got into filming weddings. And so like starting something, giving something, starting something. I remember just being like, man, I have so much debt. I can't invest anything. And I was like, but I need an emergency fund. So I'm just going to put a little bit a month in my business, and it was like I'd have to go, use some of it for a flat tire or use some, and it felt like forever. But fast forward, I'm 18 years into my marriage now, and it's like every month for the longest time I've just set $500 back in like a personal savings, or pulled $500 cash out and put it in a safe box just to have cash on hand. And that has added up to tens of thousands of dollars just sitting aside in case of a rainy day fund. I started, Nick and I started investing into our retirement accounts, and I've been investing into mutual funds over the years, and just $300 debit here, a $500 debit here, just autopilot. And what do you know, when we went to go buy our house, we had an extra $50,000 to be like, we're going to put that down on our house, and we're going to, or whatever. And so the principle though is just like, take that little bit, start investing it, and you start finding more ways. You start finding more money. You start finding more ways to save. You start finding more ways to serve people more so that you can make more. And that's what I'm addicted to, is like, I think that the way that God set things up is a fair exchange, like is awesome. He likes that. And if you don't believe in God, you do. You like a fair exchange. It's just like, yeah, I'll pay a lot of money for that steak dinner because it was bomb. It was great. Like they did a lot of work to get that meal on that plate. I would be glad to pay that. I'm happy to pay Apple for the new thing. I'm happy to pay a fair exchange. So like, how can you have an even, like, what ideas can you have to make more with your current company or make more with your clients, but give them a ridiculous fair exchange? All these things kind of all flow into just the DNA of who I am, Nick is, David, and investing is the exact opposite as having debt work against you. And I was looking, I think, a couple of years into paying off student loans. One of my wife's debt started out at like $30,000 or something, and we'd been paying $200 a month on it on income-based repayment. Just like, hey, we're paying $200 a month. That's like $2,500 a year. This thing's got to be going down. And I looked up like 3 years later, and it was like $38,000. And I was like, wait, what? I put $6,000 into this, and I owe $8,000. What's happening? And it was compounding interest the opposite way. I wasn't paying enough to cover the interest that it was growing each month. So every month it was growing. And it's like, which side of that equation do we want to be on as wedding filmmakers, as people? And so anyway, that's a lot. I know that's a lot. Any thoughts to add to that?
I mean, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like everything you just said is, my heart literally wept and broke into pieces when you were paying the $200 a month, and then you're like, oh, I should be making status or like progress, and you're like, and I think I have the reverse of that, where I was like, I haven't checked my investments in like a year or so, and then you go on, you're like, oh my goodness, I made $20,000 this year doing absolutely nothing. And so you could have the reverse encouragement of that. And I think too, what people don't know, and again, I don't want to get too in the weeds on this podcast because it is a podcast, but just for some helpful things people can do, first, tackle debt. Then once your debt, most of it is paid off minus like your house, because house is usually pretty low interest rate. So it's something you could kind of start investing after that. But with investing, even if you're 40, I even did the math. If you're 40, more than likely, you'd have to push it to around 70, but most 60 to 70-year-olds I know who have been like passionate about business and things like that their whole life, they're still working most of their 60s. And so you don't really need that retirement nest egg until 70 and beyond if you had to. And so even if you're 40 listening to this, I did the math, and you did 30 years, you started at 40, you kind of put in $500 a month, you'd still have $1.2 million. So it's still worth it. Just like John said, would you rather have, even if you're like 50 listening to this and you start, would you rather have $10,000 now or $80,000 or $150,000? That's always better for doing absolutely pretty much nothing. And the way I do it is just very simple. So I invest through Vanguard. I think it's the safest way for most US citizens to invest. It'll be different if you're in Europe, Australia, out of country. But I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast are US based. And basically, Vanguard has a mutual fund, an index fund called VTSAX, VTSAX. And it is what I put all my investments into. And basically, what it is, picture a stock. So a stock is when you buy a portion of a single company. So you would go to Apple and say, hey, I want to buy a portion. The stock's $200. You own a portion of that company. A index fund is essentially a portion of a bunch of companies all housed under one umbrella. And so VT-SAX is an index fund that has most of the top US companies inside of it. So when you buy VT-SAX, say you put $1 in there, a portion of your dollar goes towards all these different companies that get split in between all of them. And so that is the fund that I invest in. And that one typically returns around 10% a year. And that's literally all you have to do is get that fund and start putting in money in that fund every single month, every single year. And the best way I found to do it, if you haven't been investing at all, is so you could think of VTSAX as that's the fund, that's the vehicle your money is going to grow in. But then that vehicle has to be in a house, essentially. And so that house is how the money that you make within that fund is managed. Are you taxed on the money you make? Are you not taxed on the money you make? And so for most filmmakers, you should open up a Roth IRA. And that is the house that your stocks, that your index fund lives in. And what's amazing about this is say you put in $100,000 into that VTSAX index fund. And then over the course of 30 years, it grew to $1.7 million. And when you take that money out, if you put it in a Roth IRA, the house that this index fund lives in, when you take that money out, you don't have to pay any taxes on any of the gains that you made. And so that is the way I recommend to most filmmakers to get started with investing is VTSAX through Vanguard. The expense ratios in terms of like how much fees they charge are non-existent. And it's just a really simple way to get started. So I don't know, John, what you do, what funds you invest in, if you do something similar, but I'm always one for simplicity.
Yes, I like the simplicity of that. I do very similar to what Dave Ramsey has communicated with 4 types of funds. It's a little more complex, but also very simple still. A lot of similar type mutual funds. I don't own any single stocks. I am mutual funds is what I'm investing in. And yeah, this year I think I'm up on that account, even in a bad year, I think 14% overall is what I'm up. So
that's crazy.
And it, a couple of years ago it was down 10%. So it's a little more aggressive, but the idea is I've been putting in, it's like I'm putting money into this for 40 years. And as I've looked at the track record of these funds over the last 80, the average is every 10 years, it's up by 10 to 12%. And so I'm not jumping off the roller coaster when it's down. I'm not jumping off when it's up. I'm just staying on for the ride. And I'm just like set it and forget it kind of guy. I like to auto debit my good decisions in my life to where it's like, I know at the gym, I'm going at this time every day. It's on my calendar. I'm just going, I'm doing it the first of the day. It's not even a thought. I'm done with it. I'm auto debiting, like literal money out of my account that just auto every month, just going into it. But yeah, we've got Roth IRAs, we've got regular, and there's a lot to be said in this category, and we could go on for hours and hours and hours. I highly recommend podcasts like the Dave Ramsey Show or Ramsey Show now, where I agree with most of everything that they're teaching. It's very simple. It's different for us business owners. I would highly recommend talking to an a financial advisor and investor, somebody you trust that doesn't try to like pull one over on you or try to sell you a bunch of investments inside of insurance or different things like that. Somebody that has a heart of a teacher, someone that you really could trust, not just a friend from church or school that does it, but like really understanding what you do before you put your money in it's really important. But yeah, those are my main things that we do. Nick and I have money auto debiting each month into retirement accounts for us. Also have some mutual funds that I auto every month that are more for short-term things. So we just bought like a car for my wife and just paid cash for it because we'd been saving a few $100 a month into an account for 4 years. And it's like, oh, there's money to buy a car. Let's go buy it. And so, yeah. Okay. A couple things I want to think about. We're running low on time. You have lots of incredible education on these kinds of things. And I think there's not a lot of people talking about this. I know like as of this week, your Profitable Filmmaker course is dropping. It's open for enrollment soon in the next few days. Where would you point people toward with your education if they want to go deeper, they want to learn more, they do want to get like that financial freedom from the financial side of things in their business?
Yeah, so I have a course out right now. I think it's dropping this week. It should be dropping this week. So all the information should be in the show notes below. And essentially what it is, it's called The Profitable Filmmaker. And the tagline of it is how to make $100,000 a year as a wedding filmmaker in any market, any location, any economy. Now, again, that's like a very catchy title of money related, and it's really $100,000 plus wherever, you can grow from that. But my heart behind it is what we've been talking about on this podcast is, yeah, the $100,000 number is to get you to notice it because I know a lot of people want that. But the deeper part of the course is I want to help you build a business that gives life and rest and joy and that you're not a slave to. And that is my heart behind the course. And there's 10 modules in it. We talk about profitability. We talk about mindset. We talk about marketing, sales, advertising, finances, workflows. It's literally almost like the forgotten book that every wedding filmmaker wishes they had for someone who's been in the business side of it for a long time to just say, hey, you're amazing at your craft or you're growing in your craft. There's so many videos on that. But I want to be a business mentor to you and help you create a business that lasts and that works for you, not against you. And if any of the stuff we've been talking about too with finances, there's a whole 2.5-hour module just on finances, just on finances in this course. And I get deep into how to actually budget personally as a filmmaker, how to budget your business, how to budget your personal life. And there's a whole like hour-long module on just investing. I break down my whole investing strategy. I show you where to invest, what buttons to click, how to set it up, and it's all structured like that. And there's also a group coaching component where every single month I'm there with you, walking alongside you, making sure you're not getting stuck. So yeah, John, I know we're a little short on time, so I'll keep that short and sweet. But if you have any other questions on that, or if that's interesting to you guys, the details will be, down below.
Yeah. And there's so many things that like you, like knowing you in real life, having spent real time with you, to be able to vouch for your character and why you're doing this and why it's important to you and the care that you have for people. So many people look up to you as an educator in the industry. So many of us have purchased your courses and grown and learned from them. And, we only want the best things for people like you. And it just shows that you care. And this course obviously is incredible. The content that's in it, if you're on the fence about it, go check out the link in the show notes and just look through everything David has to offer there. You also have a podcast, The Act Of, that you put out all the time. You just do about a monthly episode. Is that about right?
It's around like we're trying to hit around 2 episodes a month. So yeah, that's kind of our goal. Some months it's 1, but we try to aim for 2.
Gotcha. And then if people want to reach out, connect with you personally, what's the best way for them to like send you a message, say hello, get in touch with you?
Yeah, the best way would be Instagram. I'm kind of spread out between a lot of different accounts right now. I'm a little diversified, almost too much on my social media, but I have probably my main one, which would be Forestry Films. And that is where I'm pretty much the most active. Although just personally, I also have my personal Instagram where I share a lot of just my personal life and things like that, things that God's been teaching me, things that I'm just non-related to weddings, excited about. So I'd say the best place to reach out to me would either be on Forestry Films or on my personal account, which I believe is D Reynosa on Instagram.
Cool. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. You are the man. If you ever need anything from us, please let us know. Listeners, go follow this man. You probably already do. Go get his course. You're probably already planning on it. But David, thank you so much for being here. Until everybody, until next time, we'll see you.
See you, man.
If you are like most wedding filmmakers, you are constantly fighting against being completely overwhelmed from your backlog. We get it, and that is why we are so excited to bring you howtofilmweddings.com/outsourcing, a brand new place for you to find some of the best editors on the planet to help you get out from under the weight of your backlog. And the best part is we have personally vetted these companies to ensure that you aren't wasting your time finding editors. Whether you are looking for full-blown editors like Wedditor or brideandgroom.video, or if you're just needing someone to cull your films like Wedding Post House, we have a solution for you. So head over to howtofilmweddings.com/outsourcing to check out our curated list of outsourcing experts today. That's howtofilmweddings.com/outsourcing.